as always, that was our good friend of the show, former podcast guest, Colin Gow, with his song Podcast, officially licensed. I am Steve Shoney. I'm here with my sidekick. He remains a sidekick because he still cannot book a single guest.
I own Shulman. It. I embrace it. And also, this is our first episode solo with producer Maggie, replacing the erstwhile producer Brian. So if there's technical difficulties, you know who to blame. Brian. Yeah, we'll still blame Brian for his training. I also want to throw something out to our listeners. Yes. We're going to call her producer Maggie until such time as we get a better nickname.
We do need a better nickname for producer Maggie. Maggie, I thought you were going to get yourself a microphone.
I was going to take it easy this first episode.
Okay, so she's easing it.
She has claimed that she wants to be more of a character than Brian was, who was always kind of off mic. So we offered to allow her to have a
Brian
microphone.
had no personality. I mean, let's be honest. I hope he's not
still
here
listening.
Anymore. No, I know he's listening. That's entirely what that was for. I actually saw. He does still exist. For those of you who don't know Brian, if you see a man walking through Upper Arlington who has the greatest hair of any man in Upper Arlington, that's probably Brian Hedge. I saw him walking with his lovely bride into one of our fine eating establishments the other night. So he is still out there and alive. So
and always in our hearts. But we have producer Maggie now.
We do have producer Maggie, and we have a guest today. Our guest, for those of you who, like me, live on Northam Road, I'm sure you've seen him walking back and forth to Northam Park because he does that at least 20 times a day. Well, it's one of two people. It's either our guest or Bracken. I can't remember. I know the kid's name. I can't remember his first name. Luke's dad.
Yes.
So the two of you, but we have the one, the only Shawn Henry on the podcast with us. Welcome, Shawn.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Shawn is, again, this falls into the I don't have to ask you to be my neighbor. You kind of are my neighbor. You live in the neighborhood.
Truly.
Walk by my house fairly frequently.
Is that how you book this? We just walking by like, hey, I need a guest. You want to come over today?
Basically.
Actually, no, I was this one. I was walking down the street. You stopped your car, and we were talking. And I was like, "Oh yeah, we need to get you on the podcast." And so that's how this one came about. I think that's when
that is true.
I think that's when we got this one booked.
Yeah, that's how it happened.
And our kids have played sports together for a long time.
A long time.
Let's just call it that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like it.
So, Shawn, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Shawn Henry, the Executive Director for OCALI, the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence. We just use OCALI.
Okay, awesome. So you listen to the pod.
I do listen to the pod.
So you know what comes next.
I do.
What comes next?
Start, bench, cut.
Okay.
I was nervous because you quizzed him, and I thought he might have been bluffing about actually listening. Like, why did you call him on that? It's just embarrassing. But he actually did listen.
This is actually what we should do going forward. Yeah, I listen to the pod. Okay, so
tell me about it.
So what comes next? What's our next?
I don't actually listen.
All right. So
I was listening to Layman's podcast just recently, which was a really great one.
Yeah.
Which I thought those were pretty sharp.
Stop by sometime on the walk. It is getting to Mr. Rogers' Rabbit season, and stop on by and if the timing's right, we'll make you one. So we'll get that going.
Excellent. That sounds great.
You're referring to the beverage you created.
Mr. Rogers' Rabbit.
Yeah.
Well, I get that. I don't know if people don't listen to every episode. They're like, what are you talking about?
Who doesn't listen to every episode? Everybody.
Maggie. She's like looking at me like raising her hand. This is teasers for people to listen. You got to listen to the episode to get the recipe.
I know. All right. Yes, go back and listen to the Greg Layman podcast if you want a wonderful creation that involves carrot juice, bourbon, nocino, salt, and blood orange.
Oh, nocino, that's the one that was in there.
People actually have messaged us asking for the recipe.
They have?
Yeah, on the fan mail.
Really? I don't think I'd shared that with me.
Oh, I saw it. I thought he hopefully sent it out. Otherwise, that's a person who's now on hate mail for not getting responded to.
One other, damn you, Hedge. All right, here we go. Start, bench, cut. So you said we're going to have a couple for you.
Oh, okay.
So this is one that I just got to know. Shawn is deeply involved in UA sports. Has been for a long, long time. So basketball, football, lacrosse.
Oh man, he picked whole teams that you got to just cut.
Whole sports.
Whole sports.
Oh man,
And that team is listening right now.
it
Being
would
like,
be the
"You
most
straight up
difficult
cut
thing I could
us."
have ever been.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Think of the children.
I know. Well, that's it. It's kind of like making you choose between your children.
No, my choosing it is because that's exactly all three were successful. Will was successful in baseball, Aaron in lacrosse, and hopefully Hayden in basketball.
I thought one of them was play football. Well, Hayden used to play football.
They all used to play football.
Okay.
Yep, and that's a whole nother story. So we'll get into that later. So is that for me personally?
You are making the decision.
You are making the decision that
They're gone.
get to watch as much of participate in whatever with one of those as much as you possibly would want. The other one is I need a break for all things are great. Pizza's great all the time, but you do need to eat something else. And the other one you can't do ever again.
Well, I have to start basketball. I mean, that's what we're getting ready to sit next to each other and watch a lot of. So it has to be the starter.
Okay.
It's a blast to watch. You're out of the elements, and it's time limited.
Oh man, those are all very good reasons.
And Hayden's the only one who's still at home and might hear what you respond to.
Exactly. This was the tough one. I guess I'm gonna, just for the fact that they didn't play, I'm gonna have to go bench lacrosse and cut football, which is my love and passion. But it's a forced choice here, and it is what it is.
News: guest cuts football team.
So you
Riots.
I might
ensue.
get kicked off the youth board right now.
Yeah.
You might. I think you're off the youth board. I think when I want to know how quickly it takes Mike Fitzpatrick to call you after this airs.
It'll be a moment. It'll be seconds.
No, it won't, because nobody listens. There's only 7 people who listen.
You'll know if anyone listened by the fact that you didn't get any hate mail. So
Yeah, exactly.
Truly.
we'll give you a much more positive one that you can feel good about now.
So
Yeah.
here's another one. You did say in your profile that one of your musical genres, one of them was hair metal.
Yep. I had to go through my I went back and looked in like my history. I'm like, I don't even know the answer to that because I love it all.
Okay.
Pretty much, right? So I was like that and the Dead. Yeah, that's all I know. That's all I see.
So I'm going to give you 3 hair metal songs. Come On Feel the Noise by Quiet Riot. Crazy Train by Ozzy. And Shot Through the Heart by Bon Jovi.
Can you confirm that they all are on your iPod first?
Yep, all those are
Okay.
on there.
that would be an iPhone. For most
I,
folks.
you know what? Here's the story. I still have an iPod.
I actually do too.
And I was
have, like, an
driving
old one of the
to
kids.
Chicago, and I hid it in my car. And my wife straight up said, "Dude, you can leave that out on your counter. No one's breaking into your car to steal your iPod." So
you still use it?
Yeah, it's in my car. So
It's
don't
amazing.
break
It
into my
still
car.
works.
It's vintage. Yeah,
That's awesome.
So now you've had time to think about your answer while I.
All right, tell me the songs again real quick, if you don't mind.
Come On, Feel the Noise. Girls Rock Your Boys. Quiet Riot. Crazy Train from Ozzy Osbourne.
Yep.
Shot Through the Heart. Bon Jovi.
Crazy Train starts.
Absolutely.
Bon Jovi.
On the bench.
Shot Through the Heart is benched, and Quiet Riot is going to it's going to be a cut.
So now what we didn't tell you is there is a wrong answer on this, based on the
Prior
gentleman-
guest.
prior guest, good friend of the show, Colin Gow. Next time you go to Colin's Coffee when it reopens,
I will do that.
You have to pay. If he benches,
I think it's a tax, not a double.
Yeah, I think you have to pay double whatever your bill was if you say that Bon Jovi is anything but cut.
I now that you say that, I remember this.
So
We
I
may
remember
help
this.
pick up that double if you go in there singing the song.
Yes, I
you
do
go in
remember
and
that
call
from
him
the
and, "Shot through
podcast.
Yes, if you go in and you strike up a conversation with Colin about how you think Bon Jovi is one of the greatest bands of all time, we will pay.
We'll pay the double.
We'll pay the double.
I can do that.
And word on the street is he's going to reopen as a morning thing in the Daily Growler space.
The Growler,
very
yeah.
soon.
Can't wait to see him.
So okay, that was the trick question. So Tell us the Shawn Henry origin story.
Shawn Henry origin story. Well, it started here in Upper Arlington. Grew up, born and raised here in Upper Arlington. I won't go too far back on all of that origin, but in my career, it started right here in Upper Arlington. Okay. So, interestingly enough, at the end of my street was the resource room, Miss Littlefield's classroom. So, as a senior, I did the senior service project, which, my football coach wanted me to do because he was in charge of it, which kept me at the high school.
Right.
I could lift and do my senior service project.
Oh, sneaky.
So this was back when Capstone was a service project instead of being, they basically write a research paper.
Yes. And in Miss Littlefield's...
Which was only like 10 years ago, right? Because you're not that old.
Correct. Oh, absolutely.
You must have been pretty good at football, too, if you're a coach to, try to come up with that.
I played. I at least saw the field.
I mean, yeah, if you didn't see, if you're the last guy on the bench, he's like, go do whatever you want.
Yeah,
you don't
right
have to
on.
lift. I'm writing you off.
But it was an awesome project, honestly. And so back then we were called Peer Buddies, and we'd support individuals with disabilities who were in Miss Littlefield's class. And I see her. She lives by Northam. I see her often. It's wonderful. We reconnect all the time. And that really set me. I knew I wanted to teach. I remember meeting with Mr. Sebastian, Mr. Cole, and sitting down and interviewing them with a friend of mine, Steve Michigan, saying, hey, what, tell me about, going into education. And they said it'll be a satisfying, career for you, but don't plan to make a whole lot of money.
I'll say lucrative.
And now the tennis courts are named after Mr. Sebastian, Coach Sebastian. And so it was great advice. And so I went into general education, went to the University of Kentucky. And interesting enough, in that service project, a lot of folks... I didn't realize
you were a Kentucky grad.
I'm a Kentucky grad.
Oh. Have you mentioned that to my youngest son?
I have not.
You should.
Okay. I sure will. Yeah.
Brendan King has asked, Brendan Brendan's obviously a UK grad. He has asked Nate whether Kentucky is one of the three hats on the table for him. So anyway, and it's one of the three hats. So if you're a Kentucky fan, you can tell him he's not allowed in the house.
We have family roots in Kentucky, and my wife's from Kentucky as well. So lots of roots there. And it was interesting. That senior service project was really important. And actually, a lot of folks went into the field who did that project, which is really cool. So at Kentucky, started in general education and special education both. So that's my degree is in both, which was interesting because they don't have those degrees anymore. Like you don't dual, and I thought it just gave more insight, which is something I wish they still did because I think it really helps. I learned a lot of things on the special ed side that I thought, oh my gosh, these general ed teachers need to know, and that's kind of what my career is today is. Letting general ed teachers know some of the tricks of the trade, if you will, on supporting their students. And from there, went over to started teaching. Was teaching and coaching football down in Kentucky at South Oldham High School and teaching in the elementary school for 3 years. Outside of that, I got recruited outside the classroom. They started something called the Kentucky Autism Training Center at the University of Louisville.
Okay.
Once they started that, happened to be coaching the director of that son, and he pulled me out of the classroom and said, will you come work for me and run around Kentucky supporting teachers all across the state on how to best work with individuals with autism. I remember I was just fascinated in high school by, when I was headed to Kentucky, one of the students with autism hadn't even been down there yet. He says, well, Mr. Henry, you're going to take, Shawn, you'll go I-71 to I-64 to I-60. And he's telling me the directions, and I'm thinking, this is fascinating. He knows this. And another student who is looking at a microwave and signs to me. I'm like, God, I just said something out loud like, how's that cooling in there? And he points and says, there's a fan inside. So I was always fascinated with autism. So it was kind of a path that I was on from the time I was in high school. So at the University of Louisville, I was there for 6 years. Ohio wanted to start a center that was very similar. We didn't. Ohio did not have something that was supporting. Indiana did. Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and so again, the opportunity presented itself after 16 years in Kentucky to come back home. And so took the opportunity to make that jump to OCALI and have been here. It's my 19th year.
So you like started OCALI? You're like the first?
Yeah, I was the first executive director at,
Oh, wow.
at OCALI. Yeah.
How long have you been there now? Time.
So this is 19 years.
19,
this,
okay.
Yeah,
Because I feel like
September.
I am aware of OCALI. I've heard of it. And I just kind of one of those, I don't want to say institution, but like I've always known of OCALI. So it's funny to hear that you actually were the first one. So that's cool.
So OCALI is focused on providing services to schools.
Yeah, actually, we say we do three things.
Okay.
Our three Ps: policy, practice, and partnership. We help the state government. We meet with 8 different departments in state government monthly to talk about how to support individuals with autism and their families the best. Doing that's kind of our policy piece, and we keep up with all policy. Work very closely with Department of Education, Department of Development Disabilities, and many others.
So it's beyond just the schools.
Correct. Yep.
It's kind of full through life supporting individuals.
Yep. We're founded in statute. I'm glad you mentioned full through life. We're also a lifespan agency,
Okay.
which is unique. Most often there are very few lifespan agencies, and so we kind of connect the dots for others. So we see what it looks like coming in as an infant, through adulthood, which is a unique place to be. Different. It's sometimes when people are like, how do you not have mission creep? We work hard, not to do that. We've grown.
Are you statewide?
And we're statewide.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Have you heard of the Alpha Group up in Delaware?
I have not.
Okay, they do similar type things. I mean, they're local, but
Okay.
I used to be on their board, so it's kind of similar work. So
Yeah. So, and interestingly enough, we have a pretty national and international footprint. We're kind of known in our kind of our practice area and partnership. In our practice, we are probably known as one of the largest providers of online training internationally. We have over, I think, 500,000 clients in like 200 countries that have tapped into our information online. We'll host a conference here soon enough. Last year, our conference pulled from 20 countries, all 50 states, all 88 counties here in Ohio.
who is the person doing the training? Is it the teachers who are helping people, or is it the people themselves who are kind of
Who it's for?
yeah?
Those who are connecting directly to individuals with disabilities.
Okay.
And so it's not just autism; it's across the board disabilities. So we have 300 presenters, and it's across the lifespan. So again, kind of unique in its origins, and like a conference that usually is set up in early childhood or adulthood, or we're kind of across the board because we believe that those connections are important. We've seen that for the parents because their journey is across the lifespan. And so by being able to connect that, we can, I think, help them best. So yeah, those on the front line to really, change and improve their practice in supporting students.
You mentioned I'm a lawyer, so I get a government lawyer, so I'm asked wonky questions. You mentioned you're created by statute. And
Yep.
So are you a quasi-governmental entity?
You nailed it.
Oh,
You nailed
hey!
it. We are, the Educational Service Center is our home of Central Ohio here, who works with UA and many others and supports schools all across Central Ohio and beyond. So we're housed there, but we're founded in the Department of Education statute
Okay.
and the Department of Development of Disabilities, and have other sprinklings of things in statute. So we're, in some ways, we're also a little bit of an enigma because we are that quasi-governmental, supporting the state in all of its work and cross-agency as well. So kind of unique in that way.
So I think I asked a good question, so now I'm going to start asking a dumb question.
Hold on, let me ask the one follow-up question.
You got a good question? Okay.
Then you can ask your. I know. I suspect I know the dumb question you're
Okay.
going to ask because it's a dumb question you ask fairly frequently. Yes. Funding. Are you guys funded by state government, out of state budget? Do you guys rely on private donations? This is the the
That's
chance for you to
that's actually a good question.
make the kind of shameless plug for if either this is Upper Arlington, and since we have such a vast listener group, there are people who work the State House who, if you're funded at the state, letting them know that you do good work and you're funded by the state, or if you're seeking donations, this is your chance for a shameless plug.
That's a great question. We're not no general funds from the general budget, but we are in contract with the Ohio Department of Education, and per legislation, they have to contract with us. Okay. That's kind of the quasi piece of support. But then we have many other contracts with the Department of Disabilities, opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities, and other agencies. And then we have a lot of outside, just smaller contracts, federal contracts.
So you do not rely on donations. You're kind of doing a service sort of.
Yes, we do not rely on donations.
If somebody was listening though, and they were like, "This guy is awesome. I love this. I want to help out or get involved,"
or if they listen and like, okay, they clearly need some help.
Yeah, that's the Steve option. But what can they do, or where should they go if you're not the right place?
You know, I mean, honestly, we are allowed to. We can receive donation, and we do. And probably the biggest compliment we have is that we don't put that out there, and we'll receive, you know, so and so passed away, and we wanted to support your agency because our family has used. That's just, you know, the highest of compliment is that. So, by the way, we can receive. And so if you're out there and you have a program you're interested in supporting, we can do that.
Can I ask my dumb question?
Yeah, you can go to your dumb question.
All right, this is one where you can shut it down immediately because I'm not sure how it fits, but I'm a lawyer and I love watching like lawyer TV shows, and we talk about movies and TV shows all the time, and we've had police officers on. We ask them about like the cop shows. In your field, however you want to feel as an education, is there any sort of like movie or TV show that you kind of resonate with from that perspective, or is it kind of a no one really touches it or does kind of a good job with what you're doing?
You know who did an exceptional job, and I believe it might be on HBO or some other, is for Temple Grandin's life, if you've heard of Temple Grandin. She's a famous professor at the Colorado State University. She's created 1/3 of the world's, lack of a better term, slaughterhouses, but made them humane.
Okay.
By putting like non-slip surfaces in there, making it round, like as they go through. She's a giant in our field, but a giant in her field as well. Taylor Danes played her in a movie, and I hope it's correct, and called Thinking in Pictures. It's one of the books that impacted me the most as a teacher. Came out right when I started teaching. I read it right away, and I asked everyone I was working with and my paraprofessionals to read it. And Thinking in Pictures really gives you a great view of an individual with autism and how they think and process. Not all individuals, everybody's
Right.
But if you want like a really good picture of I would say that's an excellent. Taylor Danes does an exceptional job with that. And there's obviously, I think Rain Man was the one that was
Okay,
brought
so
out.
is that legit though? Because like everyone talks about, that doesn't seem like right?
Yeah, a lot of exaggeration, a lot of like, you know, everybody thinking everybody's going to count toothpicks. So yeah, not the best for us, but again, an exposure, an awareness. Actually, Kim Peek is kind of who it's based off of. If you ever look up Kim Peek, fascinating individual who was a keynote at our conference several years, and so, you know, again, you know, I wish they would have done a documentary just on Kim, and they have, but not as exposed as that.
So you're pro Rayman, but we're not telling people it's completely accurate, but it's good for like exposure.
Yeah. You know, I'm pro anything that's bringing awareness, but you know, I hate for people to be locked into a perception.
Yeah, I get that.
It's like The Good Doctor. You know, it's a show I watch. Again, it's a perception, but creates awareness.
My brother loves that show. I can't get into it, but he loves it.
I've seen every episode. I feel like often I have to watch a lot of anything that has to do with autism, specifically because It's where I get the most questions. And if their show comes on, they'll ask me that.
Can you enjoy them, or do you have to watch it with that clinical eye of, okay, this is wrong, and people are going to ask if he really could do this or whatever? Is it like that, or is it okay? I can enjoy the fact that they're doing something that I'm kind of involved in.
It's both. Yeah.
Because I can't watch a law show without, like, especially the prosecutor ones, be like, well, that doesn't happen that way. I mean, I like it, but it kind of stresses me out a little bit.
I imagine it's harder to watch it as a doctor.
Yeah.
What they're doing and seeing how they process through those activities.
So, okay, that's a lot of work stuff.
Yeah.
You've raised 3 boys. Well, raised. Does it ever stop? I mean, good Lord, does it ever stop?
No.
And so you've got 2 out of the house. Let's call it that way, right? 2 out of the house, 1 still in the house. And 1 still in the house. How do you feel like it's different? How do you feel like things have changed in this community for your kids versus when you were growing up here?
Wow, what a question.
That actually was a good question, Steve. I don't like complimenting you, but that was a good one.
I would drop my mic, but it would sound really bad.
Especially since it's on a stand.
Yeah, how's it changed? It was interesting when I came back and they were doing some studies. I just remember this one of before the developmental lane, and then some folks. Remember, a former graduate was one of the people doing the study, and him saying, "Boy, nobody is riding their bikes to Jones or Hastings." Like he wasn't seeing that. Now this goes back about before the development.
Yeah. This is about when I moved here. Right?
Is that right?
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that was a change. Boy, we were everywhere, right? If we weren't on a bike, you're on a moped. Don't see those as much anymore.
Although, it's interesting. I really try not to look at my phone too much when we're doing these podcasts, but you might have noticed me look down at my phone. It's because I was getting a call from Brendan King, and so I texted him back and asked if he had any other questions for you. First of all, he did point out that UK grads seem to be dominating our podcast.
They really are, like probably the number 1 or 2 university representation.
Yeah, it's we need to deal with that in some fashion,
I'll put on my list of recruitment to get more Northwestern grads. Right on top of my list of getting anybody, grad or not grad, whatever. Just
and Greg and Brendan were also Tuesday night basketball guys.
Yes.
Old man league boy stuff. And Greg could jump through the roof, by the way. He wasn't really an old man. That was a problem.
Greg Lehman. And he played professional volleyball. I mean,
it was a lot of fun if we got on this team.
Yeah. Yeah. But he, up until, I think he might still have a moped in his garage.
Brendan? We had this great in-depth interview learning about him, and how do we not unearth that tidbit?
Well, did you listen to the one with Brendan?
I did.
Where we went through the whole thing about him being the most boring man in the world.
All he's got to do is zip around on a moped.
I forgot to. Although I think he traded it in for traded it in for an e-bike, which is a very it
I
is.
You're going to say minivan. I'm like, definitely most boring man.
A little more hip. A little more hip now, right?
Well, it's kind of the UA of our generation, of our vintage thing to do these days.
My brother Bo has 2 mopeds.
Really?
Yeah. Yep. Not too long ago, I actually did held his shoulder while I was on a bike.
What?
Just for a few minutes.
That sounds like incredibly dangerous.
Are they properly licensed?
Just to revisit. Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Legit.
I don't know that Brendan's was.
So you mentioned people weren't riding bikes as much. Is that because people don't like it, or because the roads have been such that you don't think people can do it anymore?
I never heard the answer to that question. It was just an interesting observation. However, I have noticed that has changed in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
That there are these kids, all over the place riding bikes, which is just nice to see, right? Like, just feels neighborly, comfortable, safe.
Yeah.
Part of our community. From when I was growing up, I mean, I think one of the things I would say that there's been a lot of consistency. They had, I had senior service project, they've had a capstone. And I see it like not being a small thing. The experiences are good. They're important. I mean, the capstone projects that my boys have done, I think, were right in line with what they're doing. So from an educational standpoint and a community standpoint, I think there's a lot of great consistency that's here in UA, and I can't think of a whole lot of things that have specifically changed. Obviously, development. You know, Lane Avenue used to be walkable inside, and it's walkable outside.
Yeah.
Obviously, the high school is amazing. My oldest son went through my experience. We walked the same halls.
Really?
Yeah. So
That must be-
before they built the new high school.
That must be weird. Like, I never even occurred to me because I've never lived where my dad went to
Yeah.
school. Like,
yeah, it was really interesting. And then, of course, I mean, he's glad he had the experience, right, from a character standpoint. But the new high school has its own character. I'm glad both my other boys have had that experience.
did you say, like, go to locker 37, open it up, my gum is underneath the lid?
That's really fun. That's actually pretty funny. I had something, and then you actually said something funny, and I was like, "Holy smoke,
Steve.
that was funny!"
Yeah,
and holy smoke,
there's
you
no
said something
lockers
funny.
in the new high school, right?
There are, but they're not assigned. So
Okay.
It's basically if you bring a lock and you slap it on there, you can have that locker for the day. I don't know a single kid who uses them.
Yeah. My kids never talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may come as a surprise to you, Steve, but I was shoved in a few lockers in high school. So,
That you were not shoved in lockers.
I mean, there was a whole hallway I didn't go down
Metaphorically.
for my freshman year.
I mean, it was Oxford. Didn't everybody just wear khakis and ties and look like they just came from a
this
business
is getting
school class?
this is getting into the personal side of things, but there was a vocational agricultural hallway, the VOAG hallway, and that's where my freshman year locker was. And every time I went in there, something not super nice would happen. So I just didn't use my locker freshman year. I had this huge backpack with everything in it. So
the big guys who worked on cars and tractors would look at little Darren Schulman and say,
you're going in the locker. And I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that they were doing that. They were seniors, and yeah.
"Did you literally get put in a locker?"
Yeah, I mean, I didn't fit all the way, but yeah, I got put in the locker.
See, I was always no one would have tried to fit me in a locker, not because I was intimidating. I was just way too big.
No swirlies, though.
So that's good.
That's where at least good.
I mean, you've heard, yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
I don't need to explain that one. Okay.
I don't know how we transition out of
I don't know
you
how I
getting-
got into like confession alley here, but yeah. I'm much more
So we were
adjusted.
talking about changes in the community. I think the other thing that you talk about, it is always, for us, we see this when we talk to residents, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
That consistency versus change, and it's one's not good and one's not bad. It's just about achieving that right balance. And I think we talk a lot about making sure the community continues to evolve. So you live very close to Lane Avenue, and we've gotten to live through, and we both get to we've gotten to live through the downside of construction. We had Amanda Hofsis on, who you know Amanda, right? With OSU.
No, but I listened.
Okay, so she lives even closer to all the construction than you do. I mean,
I did see her after your podcast, actually walking. Yes.
Yeah. So, living through the construction is not great, but from my sense, having lived through it, it's once you get through it, it's really nice having all that activity there. And
Yeah, and it's just a different form.
Right.
Because in a lot of ways, I mean, I walked to Lane Avenue. We had lunch. Kingsdale had all kinds. So
Yeah.
remember, had great options as well. Sheffo's always been there.
Yeah.
But like in the new stuff, I just look at it as just a different option that we've had in the past. No, I love it. My family, we moved here. We were looking for a house. We went, in UA, but like I said from the beginning, Mr. Sebastian said, might want to need to look somewhere else. And so we were looking at Worthington and Worthington Hills, and I mean, we landed at that. We were leaving town. Somebody said, "Hey, for sale by owner, Westmont, go look at it." My wife loved it. I loved it. It was a 1,000 square foot less than we were looking at, and we said, "We're not really buying a house. We're buying a community." That's really what it comes down to if you move here. Like, you're going to give up 1,000 square foot or more, but you're going to be walking to everything. I remember when we were first up here and we were looking around and everybody's talking about the libraries, and she's like, "What is up with this library thing? Like, I've never heard people talk about libraries so much." And then we moved there, and she's like, "Oh my God, these libraries are amazing! Like, we love them." So, I moved here in September, and she didn't come for a month and a half with the kids, just transition of the house. And when she got up here, it was like this, just like it is today. Beautiful out, October.
Chamber of Commerce Day, right?
Chamber of Commerce Day, and she's like, "This feels like we're on vacation."
Yeah.
She's like, "I can walk up to the coffee shop. I go up to, walk to the library. We can walk to church." Yeah, and so I think the changes, are all good, and just a part of the process.
So you grew up here, you moved away and came back. How far from your original home are you now?
I was on
UA's
Coventry.
not that big, right?
Yeah. Grew up on Coventry Road. And interesting enough, like 5 houses down from my cousins, right? So we had a whole street to ourselves to play out football. Probably don't see as many kids playing football on the street. There's another change. Yeah. Now that we built these great fields, you don't need it. You got the field up at Tremont.
So, and I'm glad you brought up Sally, because you were a nice person. Sally is genuinely a wonderful person. So she is an intervention teacher.
Specialist over at Hastings. Yeah, sure is.
So I know you've got to stop on the end, so I'm going to jump to our final two questions. And
we know he knows what they are because he actually has name checked 4 different episodes.
He has name checked. Actually, you've done very well. I think that might be a record. What do you love about UA? What would you change?
UA, I mean, I think it's, living elsewhere. I was gone for 16 years. I've lived in multiple, places and communities. And I don't think anything compares. I think a lot of people who come back have lived all over the place, right? It's a special place, a community that I think there's a lot of kindness, a lot of generosity that we see with our peers. Still close with classmates in a positive way. Some people don't want to embrace that. I think it's an amazing thing. I root on my fellow classmates and what they do and their endeavors. So I think common to others, I think that's a thing that we hear often. But embracing the consistency in a positive way.
What would you change?
If I think of my field, I'm always looking for how do we improve inclusive practice? Yeah. How are we more inclusive as a community, especially for individuals with disabilities? I think we do a lot of great things here in Upper Arlington. One of my creative producer at OCALI, his son, they live here in Arlington, and he went through the CARES project, right? Amazing. His son has autism, and the police department went through a traffic stop with him because he has his license, but sensory things and getting pulled over would be very traumatic. They met across the street at the church, Aaron Reed, talked about it. They said, "We want you to go out on Reed Road, and we're going to pull you over, and we're going to do a routine traffic stop. We're going to practice what that's like for you." So that's here, right? There's wonderful programs here, but I'd like to see that expanded. In sports, I think, under, you mentioned Mike Fitzpatrick, under Mike Fitzpatrick and Rob Miller, we really embraced having individuals with disabilities be a part of our youth football program. I'd like to see us continue to reach out in all programs. I'd love to see a universally designed ballpark at some point. I think that has access for everybody. It's kind of like building the turf field. Like, you build it, they'll come. Yeah. There's a real opportunity.
What would that look like, just out of curiosity?
It's so that your infield would be, so an individual in a wheelchair, right, potentially using a walker, could use a field that typically are, the grass or the dirt don't allow for that universal access. Okay. Yeah.
So you're not talking about something super impossible to engineer. It's just a different
material
or something.
Right. Yeah. A little bit of a cost. Sometimes
Does that mean having turf in fields?
It means usually it's more the rubber.
Okay.
Yeah. Design.
Gotcha.
Yeah. To it where that way it's nice and spongy, but others would really appreciate that possibility. And there's a couple around the city I just think hopefully in the future it's something standard in all communities, because it's more inviting. But because I think every kid at 5 years old, we should not be doing a special sport for individuals with disabilities. At that point, we're just wiping noses, right? We're hurting cats if they're playing soccer or t-ball. Yeah. So hopefully, but it's more accelerating. I think we do a really nice job here in UA. As you and I talked, I think at that moment when you were passing or I was in the car and you were walking, one of the Lime scooters was out in the middle of the sidewalk.
That's Steve's favorite.
That was a Darren laugh.
That was Steve's favorite subject.
That little snort there.
Yeah, sorry about that. I couldn't contain it.
It's truth. It is true because if you're in a wheelchair, if you're blind and your canes, that's a real barrier. But as a community, if we have a consciousness about, oh yeah, I have to think about that. So as you're the person walking, you don't just walk around it. I'm just going to make sure I put this in the right place. I think that's what I hope we can change in the future, continue to accelerate.
Well, I do want to give a shout out to one other community member, Brent Thieker, is on our community relations committee, and he is on that committee because when people think about diversity and equity and inclusion, most folks think race, ethnicity, gender identity, those kinds of things. Brent's on there because we need to make sure that it's about all kinds of diversity. And but I appreciate the shout out, and it's something that, as we look at improving our parks and doing things, we're always looking to do it, but we're always welcome to ideas for how to do it even better.
Yeah, and I'll mention one more shout out, if you don't mind, is we just had a big table discussion around community inclusion. We have an initiative called A plus B equals C, access plus belonging equals community. And this is a big table discussion, and we had Annie Stair, who is a community member and runs the Red Oak Foundation here in UA. And she's the one that set up the sensory friendly, and actually they had a title, I think it was Diversibility section during a 4th of July, right? You picked the biggest thing and had this wonderful space for all individuals to enjoy themselves and be a better part. That's a wonderful. So we had her present to others. Again, he's going to get a lot of phone calls on how to do that. Like pick the Dublin Irish Fest, whoever else, right? How do we make sure we just do this around? So we had many presentations. We worked with Ohio State, their hospitality program, and their students, right, on the next leaders in hospitality. We worked with Cameron Mitchell, another guest of yours.
He's rocketing up the list of our super fans here. Maybe not fan, but definitely super listener.
Yeah, and helping support individuals with disabilities. Like we're teaching the next leaders and how to make to think about including all in any community event we have, and who has a greater civic association than Upper Arlington.
I think a lot of it is just the awareness, because there's certain things you can do that aren't super expensive, but you just don't. I'll just be honest here. You don't think about it unless someone tells you, because you're not experiencing that situation, like the sensory thing, especially like movie theaters will now have a sensory showing. Never would occur to me until people mentioned that would be helpful.
That's exactly right. That's what you're right. It's not a lot of cost. It's just an awareness. We always said if we start at the edges, we start thinking about people at the edges, and we work inward instead of thinking in the middle and working outwards, we don't have to retrofit, right? We shouldn't have had to put curb cuts in, which cost a lot of money, right? Because that access helped everyone. And that's what we look at, is like that access is really what we're looking for, is across the board. Once you do that, everybody can be served. So we just have to universally design it better from the beginning.
Well, and one of the catchphrases that we use a lot is inclusive design is good design. And you just, if it's working for one group, that means it's probably working for 2 or 3 other groups that you're not thinking about at that moment.
100%. It sure is. So thank you for doing that.
Hey, thank you for coming on.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for being part of the community. Thanks for doing what you do every day in your work. Thanks for letting my kid hang out in your basement and all those kinds of great things. So thanks for coming on.
Appreciate it. I'll just mention, if people go to OCALI.org.
Yes.
We have everything's free. Free resources, free training, anything they want and need. I think they'll find it to be a very useful site. I mean, our training is really built with adult learning theory and making sure people capture that. So please go there. And if you have any questions, they can always reach out.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thanks.